Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 6th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release an episode every 2 weeks, and on the off weeks, I publish an article on the Pine Copper Lime website that features images and maybe a little more information about the artist I'm going to chat with. In this episode, I talked to Ben Beres. He's a printmaker who lives and works in Seattle, Washington, as well as an instructor at Cornish College of the Arts, his alma mater, and the third of an art trio called Sutton Beres Color, whose practice ranges from gallery works to installation, performance, and public projects. Ben and I chat about his early influences, such as how growing up in the church, the son of a preacher man, unexpectedly groomed him to be extremely well suited to the community building inherent in the art world. We also talk about the complexities of being an art instructor in this day and age, art making in the time of Trump, and how we will all need to evolve as the face of the art world, such as who has money, who collects, and who cares, radically changes in coming years. I've known and loved Ben for many years, working with him at Davidson Galleries in Seattle, so I think this might be one of the most fun episodes I've recorded thus far. You'll find that Ben has a great mind and an even better sense of humor, and I think our ready-made rapport really comes through quite nicely. Anything he mentions can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to drop me a line, Pine Copper Lime can be found at pinecopperlime.com and at Pine Copper Lime on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And as of the week this podcast is published, I'm celebrating 5,000 followers on Instagram, with a really nice etching to give away. So if Instagram and free good art is your thing, pop on over and say hi. That can be found at pine.copper.lime. Without further ado, here's Ben.
Hey Miranda, how are you?
I'm good. How are things in Seattle?
They're good. They're unseasonably warm and sunny, and everyone's got a fall smile on their face, so it's nice.
Yeah, well, enjoy it while you can.
Well, I'm stuck inside talking to you.
I'll make it worth your while.
I'm just kidding. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy we could sit down and chat. So I know you from my time at Davidson and had the pleasure and the honor of representing your work for many years there. But would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
I was born in Akron, Ohio in 1976. My parents moved to Portland pretty much immediately. And my father's a pastor, and I grew up in the church and thinking I was going to become a pastor of some sorts, but also really wanted to, just was struck with the art bug early on, and was always drawing, was always creating, was always making things with my hands, and got a lot of attention for that, and came up to Seattle to go to art school in 96 and went to Cornish College of the Arts. I was going to be a painter and a sculptor, and I kind of came out as a printmaker and a performance artist. So however that happens, but sculpture was kind of boring and dead to me, and it needed some life. And then I found printmaking through John Overton and Kathleen Rabel, who were both at Cornish for almost 40 years and just were amazing mentors and teachers. And Kathleen also showed at Davidson and helped me get that introduction to Sam. And so I had worked with Kara for a long time, and then you became the new Kara, and it was awesome.
I think I will forever be the new Kara.
The most lovely person.
Yeah, because she's and she was there for 11 years. I mean, I really had this incredible opportunity to step into this incredible group of artists that she had put her heart and soul into for over a decade. So I'm always okay with the title of being the new Kara. I wear it proudly. So you talked a little bit about your background there and, how you grew up in the church, and how did that and you said, you got a lot of attention for sort of making things with your hands and doing art, but how did that interact with the church environment? Were they supportive of the arts, or was it sort of suspicious because, you know how artists are?
I do know how artists are. It was fine. I mean, my dad was a youth pastor for most of my growing up, and then when I left for college, he became a pastor of his own church. He was kind of wild and wacky for being a pastor, so there was a lot of leeway, I think, and
Mm.
really open and accepting. But like I remember one of my first lino cuts was a like hill with a skull and like three crosses, and like I sold that magician out like crazy to like all the church members. This is like your audience.
Right.
They've always been really accepting, and but yeah, there was definitely like it was a choice of becoming a pastor or becoming an artist, and I feel like what I do is very much aligned with what I grew up with as far as gathering around a central idea, which is art versus God. Always asking for money, big sense of community, having events, having community around, and like all for this kind of greater good thing. It's just much freer and less judgmental to be an artist.
Yeah, that's something I've always found was really interesting about your story, and particularly knowing you and having seen you at your openings and the way you are very comfortable in that role of talking to people and making them feel comfortable and feel like you're sort of bringing them in to the fold, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that
I mean,
comes from.
I hated it growing up. Like my mom would be like, "So and so's sitting alone," or like, "You should go talk to this person," or like, "Go," or like, "You have to go to this," and like, I was fully formed into this, and I absolutely despise it. And I was really shy growing up, and like as I kind of grew up and got older and more confident, like I'm like, oh my God, I've been like perfectly groomed to just like be like a people person, to be an artist, like almost this like hybrid like politician artist pastor type thing. And I love it. It's great. When people talk about social anxiety and being uncomfortable in large groups, it's completely confusing to me.
I have the same experience where I understand it, but I'm always the kind of person that I'm like, ooh, an opening. I never have that like, oh, I hate them, I never know what to say feeling. But there's just, everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah, totally. And like my partner Amanda Montauk, she grew up in the church as well, so like we can go out and just have a blast at these openings, and like there's no like qualms with like spending too much time at that, or like being annoyed by people. I mean, that happens too, but it's just we're so used to it, and it's nice. It's a total added like bonus.
And then, so you touched on a little bit how you came to printmaking, but can you talk about how you realized that this was something that you wanted to dedicate a lot of your life and a lot of your practice to?
The other thing I should say is that this is like my art practice is multifaceted in the way that I've been working with two other guys for this September is the beginning of year 19.
Oh my gosh.
So it's John Sutton and Zach Color, and we go by Sutton Beres Color, and we do public art, sculpture, drawings, whatever needs to be done in getting an idea out. But yeah, almost 20 years together, and so I kind of joke that printmaking and etching is my like hobby, is my solo practice. It's the one thing I do that like no one else can like fuck with. They can't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get to tell me what color, or like we don't have to argue about the size or where it's going. It's like this is mine, and that's really like precious to me. So I have a lot of like love for the like time that I have with the plate, because it's mine. And like I love my collaborative. I love working on large scale things. I love doing performances, but like there's always so many voices that this is what I get to do completely on my own. So I think when I started it at Cornish, I remember not liking it. I was having a hard time with the image, with like the rigidity of like a rectangle or a square. And I started doing these large scale drawings that were just writing. And it was for a class that I had with Chris Brew, who's an awesome sculptor based in Seattle. And my roommate at the time, Zach, my partner, was like, "You should try that on a copper plate." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So I did it. The piece is called First Words. And I think in there I was like, "Oh, I wonder if I can go smaller." And so I jumped in and like I gave myself a task with filling a plate. And we're talking about copper etching through a hard ground. And I loved it. And I just like, it stuck. And I started like selling a little bit, and realizing I'm now teaching at Cornish. And so one of my spiels with the students were like, "I don't know if I want to do painting or print." I'm like, do the math with like selling $1,000 painting and you get $500 and you spend $100, so you get $400 and there's nothing. Or you sell 30 of these at $300, like blah, 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 blah. And also you're in these different collections in people's houses, and you get to be in shows here and there. And it seemed like a no-brainer to me, like on a pragmatic level, but also just like being a sculptor, dealing with mold making and casting. Like I find printmaking very much sculptural. I mean, we're dealing with incredibly small tolerances, but you're still like dealing with like how an acid bites into the metal, or like how deep you carve into wood, or making marks that then are holding ink or repelling ink. And it's it's really satisfying. And like, I don't know, when you meet other printmakers, your tribe. You geek out on the inks or the paper or the copper, the wood. Like it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, there's definitely a crossover between sculpture artists and printmaking artists, and I think you've really touched on it with it's about manipulating a three-dimensional surface, and in a very shallow way, but it's still that same kind of mark making, which is great.
Kathleen would always talk about microns of levels of like the ink that you're like laying down or taking off, and then like 30 seconds of an inch of like this etching in, or like I just remember like shrinking down to these sizes and scales, but also knowing that like, oh, this is sculptural, this is dimension.
So you mentioned a bit there that you were teaching at Cornish, which is a great art school in Seattle that you also graduated from. I'd love to hear you talk about what do you find the state of printmaking is these days? Like, how are the kids these days? Do they like printmaking? Do they come to your classroom knowing about it? Do you think that you're getting more people for our tribe? What's your impression there?
It's funny. I feel like I've kept out of the like larger printmaking world, like following more people on Instagram, learning more about different presses and whatnot, and then just recently going to the SGCI conferences and planning on going again this year. It's been really eye-opening and helpful.
Hi, print friends. It's me again. And no, don't worry. I'm not interrupting to bring you a well-placed, amusing advertisement direct to a target audience from an ink manufacturer, paper company, or postgraduate program. Although if anyone works in advertising for anything like that, you know where to find me. But instead I'm doing it because Ben and I have mentioned this conference a couple of times. And for those who are uninitiated, it's the Southern Graphics Council International Conference. Long name, kinda awkward, but it's a huge and super fun printmaking conference held in America once a year. It's an amazing place to see demonstrations, hear talks from top scholars in the field from around the world, but most importantly, to connect with people who are incredible printmakers and incredible humans. The next one is going to be in Dallas, Texas, and Pine Copper Lime, and me, will be there as a vendor. So make sure to get your tickets and come say hi. And as always, there'll be a link in the show notes. Okay, sorry, back to Ben.
Yes, kids are totally into it. They love it. I just think it's that constant conflict of space and material and presses and just the availability of the equipment. That is difficult once they graduate. But like for the last 3 years, I've been in and out of teaching there, but the last 3 years we've had a handful of them that just get immediately hooked and they love it. And then their BFA shows are strictly printmaking, and it's awesome. And I'm bringing one or two of my students to Texas this year for that conference. I don't know. I think it's good. I think it's helpful that we have that anchor of Davidson in town. I wish there were more printmaking like studios and galleries, but like it's pretty robust here. It seems pretty healthy. Yeah, I think they're all interested. I think a lot of them, when they get it, they realize that like, oh, this is so different than a lot of them approach it as painting or drawing, and it's not. It's neither. It can be better than both, or it's this new hybrid that is just, it's so above and beyond that. And then again, the multiple is just amazing. So right now we started with some aqua tinting, like right off the bat. which was really fun. There was an Alex Katz show at the Bellevue Art Museum
Mm-hmm.
that was all these poets from the 70s that was only, it's like 4 or 5 layer aquatints, no line etching. So we started with that and then went into etching, and now we're on to collagraphs and moving into monoprints, and then I think we're gonna dip into vitriography at some point soon as well, which I've been teaching at Pilchuck, which is fun.
What do you think about the fact that printmaking is kind of separate or can be separate from a quote-unquote large arts community? So a place like Davidson Galleries really, for the most part, does not show painting, does not show sculpture. And it seems like really robust printmaking galleries tend to be that way. And non-medium specific galleries that happen to show print, it may not get the same attention in that environment as it does in a printmaking specific gallery, obviously. So this is a question that I actually wonder a lot too. Are we doing ourselves a favor by having just a printmaking gallery, or is that sort of separation overall maybe damaging if our end goal is to get printmaking more into the public eye or more education and understanding about it?
God, I don't know. I mean, because like Kusera, the other gallery that I show with Sutton Bears Color, he will definitely show prints, and that'll be like certain editions or some silk screens or whatever. We did a bunch of vitriography through him, and that's all fine. And it seems like other galleries do include it. I'm also like in that glass world a little bit where they are just like, oh, no one takes us seriously. We're like, and that's like, and to me, that shows that print is like way better off.
Yeah.
And they're kind of stuck in this, like, we're a craft, this is all we do. But like, it also, there has to be crossover. And maybe Seattle's gotten a lot better at that because we're so heavy with glass and there's a lot of printmaking opportunities. I imagine other cities, like never the two shall meet. But I don't know, like, I also think, like, if you're just a printmaker, like, to me, that's pretty weird too. Like, I mean, there are ideas that have to be done in 3 dimensions or sculpture or bronze. And maybe that's just the way that I've been working for 25 years now, that, you know, public art isn't going to be a print or like a glass vase. But
right. Yeah,
I feel like I'm dancing around your question, but I don't really know the answer.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, because in a way, I think part of the way that we are separated is what gives us that sense of community that's so strong and wonderful. And I would never want to see that go away. But then I also talk to people who really seem to think that if artists who are printmaking specific ever want to have a chance of really making a living just doing their art, it needs to break out of the bubble. We need to have people understanding that these aren't photocopies, these aren't afterworks, that these are original works that are multiples.
Oh, so you work with PDFs? That's
right.
God damn it! No, what? Yeah, one of my like dreams, and I think I might just be in the wrong place or institution, or there's just not enough capital. But like, Cornish is such a badass printmaking studio, and I'm like, all right, let's bring in Amanda, let's bring in Zach, let's bring in Jeffrey Mitchell, let's bring in former students, let's bring in people who just work in painting, like Marjorie Livingston, or I'm just naming off a bunch of Seattle artists. Like, let's get their work, at least for their next show at like James Harris or Kusera or Soil or For Culture. Like, let's have an etching involved. Let's have a litho.
Yes.
Let's do, and then that could just start being these like kind of calling cards, A, for Cornish or whatever press wants to do it, and B, for like, I mean, I do feel like an evangelist for this medium. Like, you know,
yeah.
Look at the etching, look at the copper, look at what we've done. And I'm also, I think, doing it a little bit differently than is seen by like what I normally see as traditional etching. Yeah, it doesn't have to be stuck in this, like, I'm not making landscapes. I'm not like, so much of the problem with printmaking, to me, it's very much like contemporary dance. It's like just for the printmakers or just for the dancers. Like, it's got to be, sure, technically sound, and like I want to like look at an amazing aquatint or like badass spit bite, but like you not knowing those techniques should also be able to look at an image and be like inspired or like find it interesting. Um, that's always that conundrum for me.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to segue into talking more specifically about your printmaking practice. Really, in your last exhibition that you had at Davidson, I think is when we really saw a big transition. The earlier work, sort of to talk about that, because I think that that transition is significant, but we obviously have to know where you're coming from to understand that. When I first came to Davidson, the work that you were doing, or at least the work that we had, it was pretty, I'd say pretty simple line etching. So, just in technique, it was either relief rolled or just a line etching for the most part. And you would have kind of two bodies of two sides of that, one where you were, doing this like extremely tight writing, maybe filling the whole plane with very small, very precise writing, which of course you did backwards. Then you would have maybe it filled with images as well, filling that whole plane, and those could be images from pop culture or just kind of the general. And this is, I think I've mentioned to you before that like one of the only times I want to use the word zeitgeist is talking about your work, right. I always hate, I hate myself for actually using it, talking about art. But, so pulling something from our zeitgeist, and it was very much, I think, it felt like a lot of it was sort of stream of consciousness. Either in words or in images, or the other side of it, which I think is what eventually evolved into what I'm seeing from you now, was a little bit larger words where you maybe were actually supposed to read them, and then the visual composition of how you've placed the words in the plane is adding to the actual content that the words make. And so it's a left brain and right brain experience where you are deciphering what the words mean, and then that in itself is sort of the experience that you're having while engaging with it.
I think you missed the mark completely. No, it's great.
This interview is over.
Click. No, that's awesome. And I do think that like it's really good to like hear that and then think about where I'm at. And a lot of this does have to do with being at Cornish. And my lab tech there, his name is Bradley Taylor. He is awesome, and he's like one of the most eager, like hungry, like he just wants to know, and he wants to conquer every little bit of printmaking. And it's so much fun to have him at my side and to be like, do you know this technique? What about this? What about this? And so in the past, because I didn't have as much access to presses, I would like load up a bunch of plates. I'd bevel them, hard ground them, and they would sit. So I could work really, really long, knowing that when I had access to a press, I would plop them in the acid and then like fire out for like 2 straight weeks a bunch of small additions, or bigger if I could. So now that I'm in the lab 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I get to like work really slow on learning this aqua tint or something I'm calling messy tint, and like throwing the rosin down and trying to mess with sugar lift. But I just have more time in the lab, and that has made it so I can like slow down and pull back. Also, I think like I was 20, 25, 28 when I was like blasting all those letters down. Now, like, I feel like I'm at least old enough that I can like figure out something mildly interesting to say that isn't so like obscured with like, I don't know, I'm just going to get it all out there. Now I can like, I feel like I've paid enough dues to have like a slight opinion, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's the thing is where I see, now where your work's evolved into is this, it is so much more playful in the printmaking, which obviously comes from your access at Cornish, and again, a temperament changes between, as 20 years go by, but also the content has become, I guess for lack of a better word, just more political. I'm trying to think of what a word would be for like.
I've seen the news lately. there is a level of feeling a little bit helpless. And like, all I can do, all I know how to do, and what I am the best at is making art. And so, like, how can I do that in a way that actually means something, that doesn't feel like, I mean, it's still shouting into the void, but like maybe it's like a little bit more interesting sounding going into the void.
Do you think that it's possible to be an artist in America now and not make political work? In the sense that it's all the insanity is so present and so crushing and, as you say, making you feel powerless. Yeah.
It almost feels like being an artist or making art is a political act in itself.
Right.
That may be a cop out, but like, I don't know. You made me think of Zach Color's like mandalas that he's been doing. It's these beautiful like nature scenes, and it's like fish and clams and like beautiful plants. But when you look at them, they're all Northwest invasive species. And like, he made these beautiful paintings out of these things that are kind of really messed up politically and like causing problems environmentally in the state. And like, I think that's a really beautiful political painting without like hitting you over the head with it. I think these kids that are graduating school with like $150,000 to $200,000 in debt to be an artist, like, it's insane. Mm-hmm. It's totally insane that they're doing that. A lot of them have help through grants and student loans and parents, but still, like, when I start off with my kids, I'm like, you want to be an artist? And I kind of like giggle and I laugh. I'm like, you may have this idea that it's this like beret wearing coffee shop, like fun wine drinking opening. Like, it's fucking hard. And like, I'm broke. I'm 42. I have no savings. I don't own anything. Like, but I just keep working on this, hoping that it'll pay off. But like, it pays off emotionally and it satisfies me. But like, it's difficult. And like, it's difficult to start way in the hole with debt. And like, I feel really bad for a lot of these students. But I don't know, a ton of people I know that I went to Cornish with, they're still making art, and like, it's props to Cornish. It's props to like, I mean, this city isn't really helping sustain people like it used to. Like, people are having to leave because it's so expensive. It's interesting, but also people are getting paid. There's a lot of other opportunities for artists, right? Through Facebook, through Amazon, through Google and Vulcan. Like, so it's just not like affecting everyone positively.
Right. It's just, it's changing.
I feel like I'm ranting. It's a conversation that everyone in Seattle is like ad nauseum, just over and over and over. But it's affecting people every single day.
And I think, kind of to kind of go back a little bit to what you're saying about these kids who are graduating with this debt and they want to be artists, and that idea of like, you won't have anything. It's, since moving to Australia, I've realized that when you're in a system where you're actually being taken care of, not having anything actually isn't scary. Because
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That idea of not having anything and, being a musician or an artist and not having anything, it's okay. Because you're always going to have food and you're always going to have medical care here. And it's a completely different idea of going into the arts and creating cultural capital for your country, basically.
It's kind of depressing.
I know. Yeah. I think it really can be. And that's, something that, again, since I've been here, it's just, you just realize how much just stress Americans are walking around and holding. Because, at any moment, like, their whole world could come crashing down unless they're super wealthy. That's the only way to have a sense of security in America, is to be super wealthy. So anyway, it's, when are you guys you guys should fix it over there,
I'm working on it actively.
Yeah.
The 12 million people that will listen to this podcast will change a bunch of different minds.
I'm sure.
Start buying all the prints. It'll be great.
So the students that you have, they must be reacting to the politics of America and what they do. I guess they're millennials, right? If they're like 18, 19, when you
Yeah.
meet them for the most part. How do you see that affecting their art making or their psyche, even having grown up in this world?
Um, I think it's really weird for me because I remember being exactly in their position, like working on the same presses, and it was like George W. Bush and the WTO and like fuck world, like all the trade and like the world is
Mm-hmm.
like we have the worst president ever in history, and then it's like they're saying the same things. I'm just like, oh man, that's also kind of depressing. It's just like it was tough when I was a kid, and you're like, oh yeah, this is actually this is the worst president we've ever had.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think it's almost like a lot of them want to be Shepard Fairey
Right.
and like make the badass poster that changes the world with one glance. And like that dude's been doing this for a long time.
Mm.
Um, I think the benefit with me is I'm teaching technique, and a lot of it is having to talk to them about subtleties or like figuring out a way to say what they're saying without like giving it all up. Does that make sense? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just like, this is what I'm trying to say. This is why I'm trying to say it. This needs to be out in the world. Like, blam. Like, oh no, we actually have to work on like subtle visual cues, and like you don't literally have to spell everything out in text what you're trying to say. Like, try and work that into an image. So that's been fun and really satisfying, and I think we've gotten some good results from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think they're doing a good job of it. I think they're all really active and socially engaged, and I mean, we're constantly talking about the state of the world. But I mean, how could you not?
Yeah, that's something that's come up a few times in conversations I've been having with American artists, is that idea of, as you say, sort of that making art is in and of itself a political act, which I do believe, as cliche as that can be.
Yeah,
But as
it's a little hokey.
yeah, it's a little hokey, but at the same time, it's you're making this decision of saying, yeah, I know I'm probably not going to have anything. But do you think that in some ways Seattle might be a canary in the coal mine for a lot of America, in that our whole industry, obviously we're not doing production anymore in the sense of factories, all those are closed down all through the Rust Belt. Do you think that that's where we're going to start evolving into, is more cities are going to be like San Francisco and Seattle, and as artists we're going to have to find a way to play nice with those kids if we want to survive?
For sure. I mean, there's been so many panels. I mean, since like the first .com boom in the late '90s, like there's been like 50 panel discussions in Seattle. Like, how do we get tech people more interested in buying art or being a part of it? And like, they want Teslas and flat screens, and
Mm.
now a lot of people want experiences and travel, and the art object isn't as important. I've been to a bunch of people I know in tech, and like I walk into their places and there's nothing on the walls, or like a black and white like IKEA Eiffel Tower
Yeah.
photo from Paris that just like it's devastating. We need to learn how to play nice and like figure out. And I do think there's a lot of people working on it and crossover. I think the Seattle Art Fair has been really awesome in bridging that gap and helping. And the gallery scene at least feels really robust and healthy right now. But like, I don't think people are buying,
Mm-hmm.
at least as much as they were a few years ago.
The people in tech, it's almost like they're like this other, I mean, I guess sort of they are, there's this other tribe that's like, they let me into their community once and here are my anthropological observations. But the ones that when I've lived amongst them, what I've experienced is that it's not that they're not interested in art, or if you were to ask them, what do you think about art or anything like that, if they'd be like, oh, I don't care about that. I think part of it is that they have this idea, which I think is not just tech specific, that is a lot of people in America have this idea that sort of art's just not for them, right? Yeah, that there's some sort of magical information they need to be able to stand in front of a work of art or experience a work of art and decide whether or not it moves them.
Right.
that there's a truth value to it. I think that they're seeking, that there's sort of a right way to respond to art. And I think that if we could somehow let people know that that's one of the greatest things about art, is that there's not a truth value. You know, it's
Right.
each person's individual experience, and whether this piece of work makes you cry or makes you want to throw up or makes you happy or makes you feel nothing, all of those things are true because you're experiencing them, and that's what it is. And it's, I think, when you come from a very analytical tech,
Black and white.
black and white, because, you know, and that's all math based, obviously, all of that stuff, you know, where you're looking for a right answer. I think that we need to somehow educate people to realize that there is no right answer, and just to experience it, that is the value.
Yeah. You're allowed to hate this, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not stupid if you do.
Yeah.
Because I hate tons of art that I see every single month.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that you are holding out there, and that you're going to be a pioneer in figuring out how we're all going to survive once the whole world is made of lanyards and Patagonia jackets.
Yeah. I'm just going to make a lanyard bedazzling station down in the Amazon land. That's how I'll make my first $1 million.
I love
Puffy
it.
paint, sequins. It's
Oh
gonna be
my
awesome.
gosh, it's going to be really good. I can't wait. Maybe you can, yeah, or like, I'm trying to think if you could work printmaking into it somehow, like custom letterpress lanyards. You know?
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. Well, I'm coming up on the recording time mark. Would you please tell everyone where they can find out more about you?
Sure. My group's website is suttonberescolor.com. That's SUTTONBERESCULLER. I show at Davidson Galleries. That's where my printmaking is at. My Instagram is Benjamite1061, and that's probably the best places to find me.
Sounds good. I'll link to all of these in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and
And thanks for doing this. It's really awesome that there's like another, I don't know, avenue for people to explore print and have these stories and like see what's behind all the work. It's really awesome and admirable, and I'm super stoked to dig into all the content you've created.
Thanks again, Ben.
Cool.
All right,
Bye.
This episode of Pine Copper Lime, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.